well as the upcoming AU summit, which is taking place in Addis. From our Pretoria studios, I'm now joined by the Deputy High Commissioner for Uganda and South Africa, His Excellency Kintu Nyago. Thanks very much for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
All right, so Uganda has traditionally always played a big role in East and Central Africa when it comes to security issues. And I wonder, just as we think about developing situations in countries like DRC, how does Uganda view recent developments there?
The recent developments in the DRC, I think, are positive, are encouraging. There may be challenges, but we should appreciate that this is the second elections in Congo, in the DRC for 60 years. That's point one. But point two, there has been a peaceful transition of power from one regime to another. So amidst the challenges in the DRC, I think it's an optimistic scenario. Moreover, supported by the SADC region and the African Union and the region in East Africa.
All right, so there are other areas of concern, South Sudan, just to name another. At the AU summit, what areas do you think will be talked about, especially as we're going to see new members on the Peace and Security Council?
I think the starting point is that this year offers, this AU summit of this year, it takes place within the context of a lot of optimism for Africa. Bearing in mind the coming together, the rapprochement that occurred between Ethiopia and Eritrea, that was a very explosive situation, but now there's been a change. Bearing in mind what has occurred in the DRC, challenges are there, but at least there's a peaceful transition of power. Bearing in mind the peace talks going on in Central African Republic. Bearing in mind, South Sudan itself. I mean, South Sudan had challenges, but there is now a new government in place. There is reconciliation in place. Challenges do occur, but I mean, by and large, there is a peaceful atmosphere occurring in all those countries, and that's a very optimistic scenario for these summits, or a background for the summit. And then there's also the issue of trade. I mean, COMESA, the COMESA protocols that were signed that encourage the region, this broader African region, to integrate in terms of business and economic interactions.
All right, so we talk about peace and you talked about the areas that you're optimistic about, but Kenya recently really saw again what terror looks like, and this is something that's not alien to Uganda either. Your thoughts about what happened in your neighboring country?
Very unfortunate. The situation was very unfortunate. But we should bear in mind that the region is seized with the matter because the African Union force, AMISOM, of which Kenya is part and Uganda is part, with the support of other African Union countries, is in Somalia. And it has helped with the Somalis themselves, for sure, to bring about a strong semblance. Actually, you should appreciate Somalia was stateless. Not only stateless, but also Somalia was infested with terrorist groups, Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, and you just name it. But the African Union intervened. Uganda was part of it, Kenya was part of it, and other countries, and Ethiopia for sure. And a semblance of, by and large, there's a semblance of stability. You find that there's even a government in Somalia. And not only that, many countries have opened diplomatic missions, their diplomatic missions in Mogadishu. So, true, challenges still occur. I mean, it will take time to pacify Somalia. Somalia is nearly as big as Afghanistan. But yet the resources at our disposal as African Union are not comparable at all to the resources that you find NATO as employed in Afghanistan. But that's it. A lot of good work is being done and support is required, and I'm even optimistic with the scenario situation. Right. More so if we remain seized with that matter.
As you talk about Somalia, of course, one of the things that we've seen in conflict areas is the flow of refugees into neighboring states, including Uganda. And this year, the African Union has declared 2019 the year of refugees. Talk to us a little bit about how the AU plans to look at the refugee situation across the continent.
By and large, most refugees in the world are in Africa. Uganda is hosting many refugees from South Sudan and other countries that have got conflict around us. South Africa has got many people who have been forced to migrate here, and so forth. But as we mentioned earlier on, the positive signs of reconciliation, political transitions and peace moves that have occurred in the broader region where there is conflict provide a more optimistic scenario, because you find in South Sudan there is a new regime in place that is bringing peace together. In Ethiopia, there is no longer the animosity that existed between Ethiopia and Eritrea. In Somalia, there is an attempt to create stability in that country through the AMISOM intervention with the elected governments in Somalia. Central African Republic, they have just had negotiations in Khartoum, and it's expected that soon they will sign a peace agreement in Bangui. So if all those things are supported, plus what has occurred in the Democratic Republic of Congo, if the new regime seizes the opportunity to take the initiative to reconcile the country, all that would result into less refugee flows, less internally displaced people, and a better situation for the refugee situation on the continent.
All right, we've run out of time, but very briefly, what are your hopes for the AU summit coming up?
Well, the fact that the AU summit is taking place and that our leaders are going to engage in itself is very positive. And I'm certain that some of the issues, or many of the issues you have raised, are going to be handled, and those that can be resolved within this summit, but it's usually work in progress.
Deputy High Commissioner, thanks very much indeed for joining us and sharing your thoughts with us today. That was Deputy High Commissioner Kintu Nyago from Uganda, joining us from Pretoria. Sports up next, Eben.